Mike. Yeah, thank you very much. So we have a presentation here about the Bromley traffic program. Who is going to start us off? And hi, Sarah. Thanks for coming.
Hello, I think that's me starting us off.
Hi, Peter.
Hello, just bear with me a second. Turn on the camera. There we go. Right. So.
Are you speaking to the slides that we've been seeing?
Kind of. Let's see. Let me just get those slides out.
Just asking really for the benefit of Councillor Donovan, who's also on Zoom.
Right. I'll just track down the slides. Oh, they're in the emails.
Put them up on the screen. Will that be easier if I put them on the screen, Peter?
Yep, that's fine.
Can everybody see those online?
I can.
Perfect.
Right. So this meeting briefing is covering a variety of different things, all in the Bromley area, the Improving Bromley Roads project. So we had a briefing with the board last year on this, and just highlighted and on the next slide is the key issues from the community on what, broadly speaking, they wanted done. So it was safety, speeding traffic, perception of speeding, trucks, and school kids crossing the road and around the road. Speed, again, especially trucks and buses, they cause vibrations and noise and all sorts of things like that. Accessibility, the fact that this nearby industrial area on Maces Road is a source and destination of these heavier vehicles. There was also aspects of pedestrian safety and active transport safety, crossing to get to school, especially crossing some of the busier roads like Bromley Road, Hay Street, and some other matters that around the travel to school that had come up through the school travelling process. So that second slide there has got some of them just slightly greyed out. That's largely to reflect that they're still there as issues, but are not necessarily directly being addressed through some of these SURF projects. For example, the SURF projects that Peter Borden may speak to a little bit more in detail are about, like, they're not about the parking situation. They're about improving active travel, improving pedestrian and walking and cycling to the area. Yeah, so on to the next slide. So this is, just bear in mind, this is a plan from the speed limit changes, which there is council's hearing panel today on the matter, and I think they're adjourning next week. I think they've got a pretty full agenda, but these are the proposed speed limits to the area. Now, I just wanted to clarify there is a change. That Bromley Road and Keeley's Road, which is proposed there, is 40. We've been told that is proposed to be 30 now, rather than 40. That's the bit that goes outside the community centre and adjacent to the cemetery. So almost all of that will be 30, rather than keeping some of it as 40. This is the plan for what will be implemented, and any improvements that we do through the Improving Bromley Roads project will need to will support and reinforce the future speed limits, subject to those being approved by council, of course. Yeah, so on to the next slide. I'll just take questions at the end. This is so now we're getting into what is going to be happening in the very near future. These are the projects which have been funded through the SURF Climate Emission Reduction Fund. The orange areas on this are, broadly speaking, the scope of the area that's being looked at. In some situations, they are what has been physically surveyed by our survey team. So changes may not go all the way on some of these, or they might. That's still to be determined, and there is a bit of so
sorry, does Peter Borden, he's there, I take it?
Yes.
Do you want to just give a little brief overview of I guess just the SURF projects? It'd just be quite useful, because I think this is probably the first time the board is seeing this map, and you can also just update them on the consultant, I guess, what the status is of the project would be helpful, I imagine.
Do you want to set the table preferably close?
So Peter Borden, I've joined Bromley and the community there to deliver.
If Celeste, can you hear?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
To deliver the SURF funded projects. So those are the 6 intersections that were pulled together by Peter, who will explain where they come from if need be. But basically, if my understanding is right, I'm relatively new to this. In those 6 intersections selection of those were informed by looking at what had been learnt from engaging with the community for the last few months and last year. So a number of meetings in there, some of those points that Peter covered. And then looking at what the NZTA funding criteria were for the SURF projects in there. And that was around transport choices, supporting climate change, active transport, encouraging pedestrians, cycling, and other transport choices, us included in there. And then also what could be formed up into scope that could actually be delivered in the tight timeframes that NZTA had set us. So there's a few more slides covering that you were briefed on last week, I think it was, in there from our communications team. But basically we have to have a design for these 6 intersections into NZTA and council for approval in September, a detailed design, or sufficient design to be able to go ahead with construction. And if we then gain approval from NZTA, we will then move into construction, and that construction must be finished in June 30 next year. So it had to be a pretty tight scope, and it had to comply with NZTA's funding criteria to get the chance of being included in the program. So these guys have been, Georgie and Peter have been really successful. $3 million was allocated to these projects, provided we can get the design and the delivery done. They were also informed with the usual background of safety assessment and analysis and selection of high priority sites on those. Nominally, the numbers are kind of the priority before we had visited the site a couple of weeks ago, well, last week, sorry, with the Stantec, the consultant, who just started on steam design. And we'll be meeting with them again next week to see what they come up with and have any of the priorities changed.
Sorry, say that last bit again, please.
So we're meeting again with Stantec. They've had a week to go through and have a look and work through the intersections after being out on site, also with their safe systems assessor. That's the new equivalent of the road safety audit, essentially, or road safety advice that you got at the time of scheme assessment and looking at options. So we did both of those visits at the same time last week. But we could already see, you can probably see on the slide there are some, a couple of question marks around intersection 6 there, where that's an example of where the safe systems assessors noted that really to achieve the outcomes of slowing the speeds down and providing the safe crossings and things like that, it might be more efficient to look a little wider in some of these intersections, and the controls would then of slowing vehicles down would be more effective. So there may be some, shrinking and swelling of the scopes in it, the areas.
I mean, people do race through that way.
But there's no denying it's my first visit out there, but it's an old school design. The streets are very wide. They're like motorways, and there's going to have to be careful delivery managed of those slow speeds. The speeds will need to go in first, and they're out for consultation until July, and then back to council for a decision in July. In May. In July they're back to council, and then we've got to take that information on board, any updates we have, and include that in our detailed design as well.
I mean, from reading some of the consultation comments and stuff, like the Bromley is one of the areas where it seems overwhelmingly that people want cars to slow down.
Yeah, there's just too much space on the road.
Yeah,
that's the way things were designed in the past. It's not now, and it certainly wouldn't be consistent with a 30 km/h environment in there, which is, with the limited budget we have available, we've got to spread that as wisely as we can. And there, aside from the work the safe speed neighbourhood is doing, and we will be doing, is of course Waka Kotahi have work adjacent as well that we've got to work in with.
So related to this, sorry if this isn't the right
time far away
to be asking you, and I did mention this to Mike before, is that board members are very keen to have lights controlling the Macy's Dyers intersection, and to try to get a lot of the heavy traffic. So to make it easy for heavy traffic to stay on the ring road and off residential streets. And there are, at the moment, there's a heavy traffic restriction on St. John Street, which is ignored willfully a lot.
It relies on, I haven't looked at it specifically, but I would guess it relies on compliance that
does, and it's just a daily, hourly occurrence.
Yeah, and look, the speeds are high that we observed through there. There's a few people who came and talked to us in there. The difficulty you can see with some of those, the designers is going to have to work through some of the streets bus routes. So I don't know whether they've got some clever way of being able to change the way the street feels and the speed environment, but still make it accessible for buses, but less appetising for, or less of a desire line for budget. No. So something I'm learning as I'm going through in there. So apparently we're hearing talk from management that they're hearing that this may only be the first of the sort of surf type money. They wouldn't be surprised if more lumps came through like that. So it's the one thing that I'm conscious for when we're doing this and working with Georgina is next time this money comes through, let's make sure that we've got some really well-structured projects and preliminary design in our pocket that we can pull out and develop very quickly and put in for the next programs that are through, and keep that being fed in. Because Peter and Georgie did a really good job of pulling this together in a very short space of time and being successful. So we need to learn from that. So get ahead next time.
What in terms of this briefing, what else do you want to share with us? Because I know there's only I can give you some. You probably after dates and when are we going to be active and things like that, and revisit those dates you're given from there. So very broadly, there's just a common palette of measures we'll be looking at there, such as
raised pedestrian safety tables, determining safer sites to put those, and where people, the design line is for people to cross. Outside the back entrance into the laneway that comes out of the back entrance of the school, things like that. You've got to look pretty carefully at situating them in far enough away from the corner, close enough to where they're coming out, fitted in between the driveways, and then in that location, are you still able to control the speeds, or are there extra measures needed closer to the intersections and things like that? So there's all that the design team has got to work through. So they won't be significant. Well, they will be significant. They will make it. They will make a difference. Some of the things we're also looking at is there have been some other approaches of putting in not necessarily permanent works in there, more a transitional approach. And once you can see if there is perhaps a need where the design solution isn't really certain, and you might want to put in an approach that could be adjusted or tailored, should things change once the speed limits go in, then that can be done. Or if we have a bit more certainty around timing of when NZTA may or may not be doing some work, and then we could take that approach rather than putting concrete in, expensive concrete in less locations and having potentially less of an effect. If we just carry on, so one thing I should refer to is just the long line in there, the dashed line in there is just reflecting there was a, don't know where it came from, but there was a comment or a desire or a note that some sort of cycling facility along Hay Street would be beneficial. I would say, after walking through with the design team and the safety engineers in there, that that'd be a pretty significant project, given the width of the street, the deep dish that's in there, the coal tar that'll be there, drainage from private properties relying on that. And I guess as a project manager, I was trying to get something like that into a program with some sort of certainty. It really would probably need to be set up by itself, because it'll be a significant expenditure, I'd suggest.
I mean, yeah, that's the street that I know go to Yanni, but where there's significant issues with buses going to their
depot.
Yanni, you have a question?
Thanks. One of the things that came up from the community was that a lot of these roads have earthquake damage that still hasn't been fixed. And so I didn't get that on covering issues, but I just want to make sure that that was being picked up. And the other thing I don't get any sense of, my understanding on Hay Street, for example, is road renewal that's going to happen.
I don't have knowledge of that. If I'm looking at those aspects.
So it'd be really good for us to get an understanding of what are the road renewal projects based on need in this area.
Well, other, and I guess Peter and Georgina, if you can answer this question, what are are road renewals going to be done in tandem with this?
There are craft projects that overlap and surround this area as well. And I'm not aware of any directly in there. With renewals, that'll be part of the assets renewal program through the asset planning too.
It's just that I guess the reason that the community are quite concerned is that because the roads have been so bad damage not been fixed, the vibrations that they get shaking from the heavy vehicles, in particular in the buses, and there seems to be no other solution other than fixing under the road to solve that. But
can I just pick up on that just so I don't forget? So if you go along McGregor's Road at the moment, and I've seen some of this through Snacks and Soul, there are along by the cemetery on the house, the side where the houses are, there are dips, like depressions in the road where it's sinking in different places. Like it's a road that has been sort of patched up, and it's like this all through Bromley. There are bits where it's actually dangerous to ride down there on a bike and not watch the road.
So I think just getting that understanding of that bigger picture of road renewals would be really good. There's both the operational renewals that we do as a council, and then there's the capital renewals that we do as well. And in the past, unfortunately, we haven't had the two teams talking to each other. So if you take I think it was Lion Street, we did the maintenance renewal when we'd scheduled a capital renewal and then wasted the money, unfortunately. So it just would be really good for this one to learn the lessons from the past and make sure we're kind of aware of what the renewal program is. I understand council has a renewals budget at a program level, not allocated to certain streets. So if we're clever as a board, we could advocate to try and bring some of that money forward to do it. The other thing that I just didn't want to decide of, and I'm a bit confused where everything's got to, but the whole district planning around the classification of the roads as well. It seems to me that there's a fundamental issue with some of the roads through this area in terms of classification and what that means in terms of maintenance.
That's the sort of thing that Peter and could perhaps talk to.
Okay.
We'll get a little bit more involvement. Sorry, the remaining slides from there are really just backup slides of information from the communications presentation,
So,
the SURF program, just so we have the dates. Anyone else hadn't seen it?
So the other thing is it'd be really good to understand what's happening with the major cycleway route. I don't know if the Waitai cycleway MCR, the route has been confirmed, but we've now got issues up at Pages Road Bridge. We've got issues potentially around Worcester Street, and we've got possibly the idea of having a cycleway through here, which I'm really open to. But it'd be good to know where the MCR is going, so that we're all on the same page. Does anyone know? Like maybe the previous board approved it, or
yeah, I mean, I know that the I haven't seen anything. There's the in terms of the well, we've got some stuff that's been gone to the spread and Cashmere Heathcote board, but yeah, we certainly haven't got anything about routes.
Well, can we find out? Because if we're trying to aim to improve people not using cars and using alternative forms of transport, then just at least having some awareness of how the improvements we're doing here would connect into what we're potentially proposing, I think would be quite helpful. Like where the connectors could go, where the logic would be in terms of demand.
I think that was probably part of the suggestion around Hay Street, and connecting down to Linwood and the cycleways.
Yes, because there's a craft project on Smith Street, which is the Smith Street cycle and pedestrian improvements. So that could connect quite nicely into Hay Street. But I can confirm that it hasn't been looked at in this Bromley area, an MCR or a route along Hay Street at this point. We know there's one on Worcester Street that's in the long-term plan. I think it's quite far out though. And just in terms of reseals, Yanni, I was just having a look at the Forward Works viewer, which we are working quite closely with the assets team now around planning to make sure we don't have the issues that we had on Wyon Street. And there is a lot of chip seal planned for the, I guess, 23-24 summer, which I'll share with Peter Borden, because it's only just come up onto the Forward Works planner now, but it will coincide quite nicely with the work that we're doing with SURF, so we can update you with those locations as well. Cool.
Thanks, Georgia.
So, as I said, the remainder of the slides is from the communications strategy presentation. It's given online. So unless anybody hasn't seen it, then.
So in terms of the targeted early engagement, which starts soon, so that's with key stakeholder organisations and people who've been involved in the discussions hitherto.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah. So there's a general strategy, and then for each project, there is a targeted strategy down to that to the sort of level that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I thought we had a report back from the group to the board. It'd be good to kind of understand at a project governance level what our involvement is, how the community has been engaged at the board project governance level, or the community working party, or whatever it is, and then also what's happening with like the e-newsletter, which was supposed to be set up. I think part of the problem is that this process is kind of overtaking the other process, and it's really confusing for people to kind of understand what's happening with things like budget, how they can influence the priorities, I don't think it's services around this at all.
So I guess, I mean, obviously the surf and prep process has overtaken what was there prior. And so we are where we are, but the question is how is in terms of, I mean, the funding is the funding. Funding is what's being granted, right? So in terms of priorities though, are you asking the community about what should be prioritised in the engagement?
Those intersections are what we think we can deliver according to the timeframes available.
So what are you asking in the targeted early engagement?
I can't speak details to it. I don't have those at the moment.
Because I think the concern was previously.
We're going to get a response from Georgina.
Sorry, I was just going to say that the targeted early engagement is, as you mentioned, it's the largest stakeholders. I believe it's the Linwood ward group, and the actual consultation will be in the style of like a social pinpoint map, similar to what they did for the safe speed neighbourhoods. So we will be looking for feedback from the community, which can not necessarily influence what we're delivering under surf, but influence what we're looking at for future projects in this area. So we are looking for as much feedback as we can get, whether it relates directly to surf or whether it relates to craft projects, whether it's something that someone wants to see on Jolly Street. We are looking for feedback for everything, hopefully.
But I support these projects being delivered. But if you're we are going out for consultation to ask people about these projects when these projects are just going to be done and they're going to be done in the priority that they're already set. That's not really consultation. You know what I mean? Like, so that there's not a quibble with the projects themselves. I support them. And I think all those intersections need doing. But what are we actually asking people to provide feedback on about these projects?
I believe they're going to ask what's missing from the map. Where are we missing items? And I think that's where we'll be able to pull for the Bromley part of the project, where we can pull additional or prioritise additional pieces of work in the future. But we can get some further clarity around that from our engagement team, if you'd like.
I'd like to understand what it is we're asking for feedback on. So is it fair to say that we, the council, have done work with the community and these intersections haven't been? I know that we were briefed about these same intersections were the ones that were mentioned to us as a list of possibles. Is it fair to say that the council believes it has enough feedback from the community to establish these as priorities, and that's why we're not really consulting on them being done and instead asking for what is missing? So it's a long question, but
it's a great question. Peter Rogers.
Yeah. I think yes, kind of. So I can go into a bit more detail about. I mentioned in the briefing cover sheet about something on where each intersection came from. So number one, I think those numbers are still the same on the map, aren't they? On page 4, I think. The Hay Street. So broadly, the issues with the heavy vehicles are on Hay, Ruru, Bromley, and the Bromley and Keeley's route between Maces and Linwood Ave. So that is a factor in those intersections being on the list. The Hay Street intersection around Butterfield was in McGregor's Road was identified through engagement with the school and the school travel plan. It was also talked about in the community group that we had met with last year and in the start of this year as one of the places to target. It's a busy road. Most people will in the area will go through it or be familiar with it. And also we're looking at just generally reducing those speeds on Hay Street, because we know that those speeds on Hay Street are too high. The next one on the Ruru Road intersection, the T intersection up there. So that was discussed at the community group as well. I think it was suggested by a resident of the area, but even before that, this was after there had been a fatal crash that had happened at that location just very recently last year. So it was definitely at the top of everyone's mind. The third one in Keeley's Road and Bromley's Road, again, that one came from the school travel plan. It was one of the top, if not the top, well, I say one of the top because I don't know for certain if it was the top one, that a lot of parents/children identified as a difficult one to cross to get to school, to walk to school. The number 4, the Walcott McGregor's by the shops there. It's a very, very wide intersection. We've got a bit of angle parking in there near the shops. Almost all of that, I imagine, will stay, but we don't know. There's certainly some evidence of antisocial road user behaviour in the area. Street view of March 2022 has some big black circles in the middle of the road.
There's some there from yesterday too.
Possibly the same ones. I don't know quite how long they can last. But yeah, it's definitely present in the area. Hay Street Korora intersection. Again, that was on Hay Street, so it's looking at addressing the wider Hay Street issue. Was also discussed at the community group. We talked about possibly putting a miniature roundabout, something in there, but we'll see how that goes through the design and whether there's space. And the Korora Kawau intersection, that's by the school gate. So that's it's where all the kids come out. Well, not all the kids because it's a secondary gate, but it's where a lot of kids come out and get picked up. Very wide intersection. We want to reduce the speeds, reduce the crossing distances, that sort of thing. That was also talked about at the community group.
Right.
So in terms of what we might be getting in the future, so the social pinpoint that Georgina mentioned. So yeah, so essentially, yeah. So I'll go back to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Did you have a question, Joe? No. Just before, so I'd quite like to talk to Mike from Wakakutahi before we get to the end of the evening. Just before we do that, Sarah, did you have any questions?
No questions, but I can confirm that those intersections were high. All of the intersections that we identified with problems have been addressed in those.
Yep. So you're happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's helpful. All right. Thank you very much, Peter and Georgina.
So, one thing I would ask, you're asking about engagement.
Yeah.
We do need some input on the finer detail of where desire lines are for kids and where they're going to and things like that, so that we can use that to fine tune where these, if we've got options.
Assuming you went to the store.
Yeah, any assistance we can get, I gather contact hasn't been easy to get and feedback hasn't been easy to get.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think just to kind of take a step back, one of the concerns when we started first raising these issues is that unless you get a plan for the area, a local area traffic management safety plan, that what you do at one intersection has an adverse impact to a place that you don't look at or don't improve. And so, I mean, I've been around, unfortunately, on the board, so some would say unfortunate, others would say fortunate. Since the first, one of the first local area traffic management plans was done way back with Lorraine Wilhurst, I thought we were developing a Bromley traffic plan and then kind of working through with the community over what the different trade-offs are in terms of priorities and in terms of impacts. Obviously, this process is going to overlap the ability to get a plan in place. But if we have a sense of like when we will be able to get some plan in place, and I guess just the final bit of feedback is, and again, some people say fortunate, some will say unfortunate, but what's been done on Rolleston and Park Terrace at relatively low cost with a degree of flexibility seems like quite a sensible way to go. So having some visibility of the budgets that we've got, like the council budget, $1 million over 3 years, 2 years, and then the surf budget, I think would be quite useful to know how much money is being allocated to each intersection and whether there's ways we can do it in a more flexible, possibly transitional way to kind of see what the impacts are. And then got it wrong, or we just,
And that makes sense. I've asked Peter and Georgie about the same sort of question. When you say allocated to the intersections, once we've got this initial stage of design thrown back, we'll have some idea of what the measures currently in the design might cost.
But at
Then we can.
the moment, I assume money is allocated to the project, and
Yes.
you need to look at how much the parts.
At the moment, the only certainty we've got is we've got budget for design. Once we get NZTA approval on those design, then we'll have budget.
there's no guarantee. I've read the funding agreement. There's no guarantee from Waka Kotahi that the next stage of the process, surf projects get funded to be built, but we do have the money to do the design work.
We've got somebody from Waka Kotahi here, but Peter's got his hand up, so we'll go to you, Peter.
Yeah, I'll just on that first thing, the team at Waka Kotahi who will look at the designs, they've got a list of they've already told us what they are looking for in the designs. So you're right, there is no guarantee that what we get will be approved, but if we're following the sort of criteria and aiming to achieve what they want us to achieve, then we most likely will. But it's an issue which will be worked through. Secondly, on the wider area plan, so yes, the intention is still to do that. Still to develop that. The feedback we get from that social pinpoint will be very useful and incorporate into that. What I kind of envisage happening at this stage is having a high level look at how each road is functioning currently, its traffic volumes, traffic composition, and having another, I suppose, layer of how we want each road to change. So, for example, for heavy vehicles, when we're looking specifically at heavy vehicle volumes, we'd want reducing the heavy vehicle numbers on Hay, Ruru, Bromley and Keeleys, and upping them onto Maces Road and State Highway 74. Similarly, similar with the cycle connection, similar with the pedestrian links. Pedestrian links are more or less follow the intersections and design lines, and as Peter Borden mentioned, we will be aiming to get our pedestrian improvements aligning as best we can with the existing pedestrian design lines. So yeah, it is still being developed, that's plan, and from what we get from the surf feedback, we'll all go into that. So any and all feedback we get from that, even if it's irrelevant to the specific projects and it's talking about a different issue for the future, we're still going to take on board and use that to develop. Cool,
thank you. That's good to hear. Now, Mike, would you like to join us at the table so we can have a brief chat?
Absolutely.
So, as I mentioned to you before, like in terms of this area, and I'm happy for members to ask questions about other, because I presume you don't just cover this area, you cover a wider area. Then,
so Mike Blyleven, I'm a principal transport planner. So I get called in when we have projects looking for improvements on the state highway network. But through that whole process, I would typically work very closely with the likes of Peter at the council And as Yanni's pointed out, when we're thinking about the state highway and the intersections along the highway, and which ones are appropriate to encourage more truck activity in and out of, and the current issues that we know of is that it's difficult to turn right out of some of these intersections, and hence those trucks or anybody will avoid those intersections and rat run through the undesirable routes that part of what we're seeing on the screen here is trying to address. So in talking with Peter when he raised the issue, and it came through from Mark Pinner, our network manager, who then came and saw me. And so Mark deals with the here and now. I look into the future. Is there a problem? And if we were to look for a solution, where would that solution be? And what could that be? And everybody obviously jumps to signals at Maces, and that's probably the right thing. But I think there's a bigger exercise that needs to be gone through and looking at all of that industrial area and how in the future we want trucks to manoeuvre through that area to avoid the more sensitive areas. And then that starts to come together and says, okay, so how would we give effect to that? And so, we at the moment don't have any projects on the books for improvements at these intersections along State Highway 74. We are aware of the issues, and I'm here to hear the issues from your perspective. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So Yanni and I have already, we've already had quite a few questions. So I just want to check if other people do. Any specific questions around the?
Are you just focusing on the highway?
I guess if we could focus on, so I'm pretty sure I can guess what you're going to ask about.
Yeah.
But if we can focus on those intersections, problem intersection on the state highway network going to go through all of our wards, that would be good, and then we can make a mention of that particular bridge.
I'll leave you to it. I have to get to a meeting. Thanks, Sunday.
Thanks,
Peter.
Are there any particular intersections that anybody is concerned about? We've raised Maces. I have another one which.
So this is specifically on 74.
Well, anywhere in the state highway network in our board area.
Oh, we've got the issues with the flooding at Pages and Anzac with the design of the road which turns south. It's just been designed wrong, and the flooding just, it's really bad. It kind of diverts traffic around the traffic lights instead of around the give way.
Kelly?
Yeah, I get contacted quite a bit by residents about the intersection of Marshland Road and 74, just in terms of cycleways. Yeah, I've cycled through there a lot. Doesn't really bother me, but it seems to bother a few people. They just feel unsafe. I don't know whether there's anything that can be done. Another issue I get brought up a bit is the on the south side of 74 between Marshland Road and Burwood Road. I know it's not an intersection, but just with the vegetation, brambles growing into the path. I raised it with Richard, forgotten his name,
Osborne.
Richard Osborne. Mark Pinner told me that the Marshlands Road end is, they're not sure who's in charge of it, but the area they identified was not the part that people were complaining about, was further down. Anyway, and also just in terms of students going to Waitai School down at crossing 74 from Burwood, going up Burwood Road to Waitai. I've heard people quite concerned about that intersection. I think there's a relatively high number of children coming from that sort of south of 74, heading up to the school up there. I'm not exactly sure what the solution is, but it'd be a good intersection to look at. Apart from that, just a bit of feedback on 74, where it heads from a sort of QE2 kind of corner, and then heads south. That little set of traffic lights with the raised platform, fantastic. I think people have really got used to it and can see the value in it. Don't have to stop along, but it's a lot safer for those high school kids to cross it. Yeah.
So that's on the free turn
Across
type areas of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
intersections.
Yeah, it's just kind of, it's off the main intersection, just to 20, 30 metres, but it's working really well, just from what I've observed, passing there a lot. That's all.
Can I use mention the big one?
I'll mention the big one. Then Celeste and then Greg, and then Jan.
So
Thanks.
Anzac Bridge and New Brighton Road intersection. Even for cyclists going across the cycle median, it's really, really rough condition. And if we can get some answers as to when the bridge will be replaced and the work done around there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you've probably had an answer in the past. I mean, as far as I'm aware, the bridge isn't scheduled for replacement soon. And that comes from a structural renewal perspective, and the bridge is there, and, we're all under financial constraints. And so that will be waiting through its replacement process.
I heard the other day it could be 2027, but obviously not.
I'm not, again, our network managers and their bridge engineers have a structural replacement list that they work through.
So in the meantime,
and it's a national list.
in the meantime, could anything be done about the state of the islands and the approaches?
I can raise that with our network management team, and they will look at that with safety engineers. And a lot of the questions or the issues that you're raising here, a lot of them come back to active mode routes to schools or other things, and where they come across an intersection, is there something that we can do?
Yeah, well, that's because of the high schools, that cycle path along is used quite a bit.
Yeah.
And the crossing in the median is really quite nasty.
Celeste?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I've got headphones on.
Yep.
Oh, great. The two intersections, one of Joe's mentioned one, which I think is Waka Kotahi. I don't know if that limits us as what we can do.
So this is, we're talking to Waka Kotahi.
Oh, great. So I'd agree with Joe's comment around the Pages Road left-hand turn, which I think, given the proximity to a key tsunami evacuation route, is quite an important one. We've got inward roads and Marihau Road. We've had some feedback, and I think we've had a look at that previously in terms of making sure that's safe for pedestrians and other users of the road. And then the final one would be Bridges Road and Estuary Road, where the roundabout is next to the community hub. There's quite a lot of people parking outside that.
It's council, I think.
Oh, yes, so this is just Waka Kotahi, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just switch that around then. The Dyers Road, is that being mentioned?
We have mentioned Dyers Road, but probably not the bit you're thinking of.
Okay, yeah. So Dyers Road, and Yari will know probably where I'm meaning here. We've been quite keen to get sort of more safety improvements going past the Eco, the dump along that stretch of the road. Cyclists go along that road, but there's very little in the way of traffic calming along there. It's quite a high risk area, and I see people biking along there quite a bit.
That has been raised before. Well, from that we can, I had Greg and then Yanni, but we'll go Yanni and then Greg.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, that's why I'm interested, like, if we're gonna put a cycle way down Hay Street, but we've actually got the ability for an off-road, separated cycle lane from Linwood Ave to the Bridge Street roundabout, and hopefully, I know it'll be council, but over the other side of Bridge Street, there's no footpath, I think, or so people are really concerned about that. So unfortunately, we were told, I don't know, Waka Kotahi has no money for the cycleway on the state highway, and then we were told council has no money, but we were given all the surf money, so we do have money, but they then put a double fence because the wastewater people put a double fence through, and no one thought, despite us raising it repeatedly, that we want a safe cycleway off separated from the heavy vehicles. If you go down there, you see quite often there's heaps of debris that comes off the trailers that are going to the tip. And so there's constantly things like branches and rocks and just heaps of industrial type waste as well. It just seems to end up on those cycle lanes. There's plenty of space. There's no issue with space apart from probably just through that industrial, that really busy industrial area where you've got the businesses and the vehicles turning. But it'd be really good to try and do something along that line. And I would suggest that that Ruru intersection also needs to be looked at in terms of not just Masons but Ruru, because ultimately what we want is some sort of consent requirement, or maybe it's through the contract with GoBus, that the buses have to use that. They have to use the main collector roads rather than go through Hay Street and the resume point. Now, we've been told in the past there's no data to monitor where the buses are going, but I'm pretty sure with technology that both ECAN and Waitai would be able to understand through the GPS the times and the speeds at which the buses are going. Maybe it's only for when they're in service, because a lot of the complaints are outside of the normal bus service time. So it's not the standard bus routes, it's the people going into and from. So, but I mean, I guess the other.
Where is the depot?
So it's on the corner of Ruru and Masses Road. And it's just an abomination, really. It's not in.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be any thought to like land use requirements if you're allowing a bus depot, a public bus depot, just to set up. There's also flooding in that area too. That's I guess the kind of other thing, and I know that's not into TA, but we do need to think of Masons Road. The flooding fix is actually quite difficult, as I understand it. So you might not want the heavy vehicles going through, because when it floods, the heavy vehicles come through, including buses, and they push all the water out into the neighbourhood.
Well, if we're going to put in making it easier for and more preferable for heavy traffic to use that, then that Masons Road needs renewal because it's really badly damaged. I know that's not a workable target.
It's on the plan, but they want to do that. Yeah. They need to do some underground work first. And
so I'm just aware, Greg, you had your hand up, and then I have just one little bit.
I'll just quickly, the other two places that I'll just give you feedback on is
quick though, please.
Yeah, the Ferry Road or Rutherford Street intersection, really dangerous, and the right-hand turning arrow that doesn't exist. So for people turning from Ferry Road into the State Highway 74. And the only other feedback I would give is just around the lifelines and start the safety around the Rutherford Street Garlands Road Bridge. Really old bridge. And if you look at the cycle lanes, they're really quite exposed to the heavy vehicles going through there. So cool, thank you.
Just want to second that. So we had a resident come to the community board about that Palanuris Ferry Road section, that and residents who live on the others on Rutherford Street are quite keen to see the approach to Rutherford Street. So Palanuris slowed down, like from 70 to at least to regular 50k, which might help some of the issues they're having. Now, Greg.
Yeah, so with just following to Kelly's point before about Waitakere School, that'd be with 74 on Burwood Road. They have already been discussing some issues around at a board level anyway, around travelling to and from school. So they already have done some research in that space as to what potential issues may lie around that 74 Burwood Road intersection. So yeah, definitely worth contacting them. And yeah, likewise, the works we talked about earlier seems pointless without having that exit from either Masons Road or Ruru Road end. It's not. I don't think it's just limited to one end. I think both ends would definitely benefit from it because you've got a lot of people that are not just industrial coming through that section, but there's a pretty strong feeder onto that system at that end. And if you go too close at one end, potentially the traffic could snail up. whether it's a Wickham or Ruru Road entrance. But yeah, it's more than one.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Just one final thing, which I raised beforehand, it was great to get those start works notices sent to Cindy so that we can see them for Waitai projects as in let our community know as well.
And that's probably mainly on maintenance because we do tend to get the new works. It's the maintenance ones that we.
Well, currently community board members get notices through, but we are going to start getting. All right.
Kelly had a question.
Do you have a question?
Just a very quick one, Mike. Is there a precedent for doing tunnels under state highways? You know, like that. There's one further down, cycle tunnel down by Hills Road. Is there to retrofit something like that? Is that highly unlikely? I mean, imagine
Potentially it is. I mean, they're not cheap, and depending on where they are, and particularly with some of the wetlandy area, the underlying water table here, they would be quite difficult. And so, you know, there has to be a really big demand for that route, for that to be considered. But again, everything ties back to a network management plan. And where do we want the big vehicles? Where do we want the cycles? And working together with your officers, we can hopefully start getting a plan for the future. And then when things like surf come along, you're in a good position to be able to say, yep, here's what we'd like. And there's building blocks that we can hopefully work to. And the more we can demonstrate to our funders that we're aligned and joined in a sensible direction, the better chance we all have of securing things going forward.
Thank you. You have a quick.
Yeah, just very quick. Just so the other two with Garland's Road and State Highway, we had that free turn left just with the railway line. And the other one was getting the trucks from the Kenaway Port Link development to access Tunnel Road directly would save a lot of trucks going through residential. So, and just the final thing is with the Bromley stuff, like it's my understanding is
it's 3 times as many things.
Yeah, I know, but my understanding from the time pressure is that Waka Kotahi have got the deadlines in, but if we were able to have more time and come up with that plan, I don't know if that's something that could be considered. I'm just concerned that we, you know, like for all the reasons that people raise around the time. But anyway, I'll just thank you. And then Mike for coming. I think it's quite good.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
it would be good to sort of meet, you know, once a quarter or something.
Yeah.
No. So we're put up between Bridge and going down towards Dyers Road, but there's a big gap, especially since it's for evacuation from Bridge Street for pedestrian and cyclist, linking up to Pages Road. So we've got half of a cycleway which goes into the, it goes down Anzac Drive into behind Bexley Reserve, and the cycleway stops there, but there's no pedestrian or cycle access out of South Brighton, or safe access, linking up Anzac Drive, but also for evacuation purposes, getting people out of that area. So pedestrian cycle out of that area and along between Bridge and Anzac.
All right. Thank you, everybody. If we're finishing now, we feel that we could do this all evening, but we can. If you'd like to join me with the karakia whakamutanga, and then we can to our next meetings and to our families. What else we have? Una here, Kise Uru, Te Wate, Te Mama, Te Ako, Te Tina, Te Wairu, Te Tata, Koera, Whakaria, Akiki, Kia Tina, Tina, Thanks everybody.
Thank you.